brought eggs, and if you're gonna throw them, just aim for the purple table, okay?
But not the purple person.
Yeah, well, I don't know, the purple person, I don't know, who'd that be? Well, you.
Yeah, you guys are good to go.
All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this forum designated to give the opportunity for the candidates for governor to articulate their vision for the state government in the Great Badger State. I'm Jim Perry. I'm the retired campus executive officer and dean of the University of Wisconsin-Fox Valley, now a campus of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. This afternoon's forum was organized and sponsored by UWO's American Democracy Project and the Campus Election Engagement Project. All 6 of the candidates for governor were invited to attend, but as you can see, only 4 of them and their lieutenant governor candidates have chosen to be with you today. The questions for today's forum were conceptualized by Zach Herrikus, with help from his faculty advisors David Seamers and James Krieger. I took the liberty of putting them into my own words. So here are the ground rules for today's forum. We'll start with 2-minute introductions by each candidate of who they are, that is the gubernatorial candidates. I don't think we have time for all the lieutenant governors at this time. Who they are and why they're running. Each candidate then will have 2 minutes to answer questions that I will pose to them, and they are not being interrupted. The forum is being recorded for rebroadcast, so after 58 minutes, we'll take a short break and then we will resume, finishing the questions and then allowing the audience an opportunity to ask their specific questions. At the end of the prepared questions, each candidate will be given an opportunity, if they wish, to ask a question of another candidate, and each candidate will have an opportunity for a closing statement of 2 minutes. So, in random order, let's start by asking Maggie Turnbull to introduce herself, and then each candidate can follow in their turn. Maggie?
Thanks so much, Jim. I'm Maggie Turnbull. I'm running as an independent for governor of the state of Wisconsin. I'm running as an independent because I don't think that the 2-party system is meeting our needs anymore as a population. We have to get away from a system that is obsessed with dividing us from each other and results in relationships that are strained and ruined because of the kind of rhetoric that comes from our leaders. And I know from my own experience serving on the City Council of Antigo, Wisconsin, that when people are sincere about wanting to solve real problems in order to keep cities running and states running, they come together regardless of politics and they just get the job done. I've seen it over and over again. And I think that that's who we really are as a people, and I want to see that reflected in our state legislature as well. I actually want to turn the last few seconds over to my running mate, Will Loesch, to introduce himself as well.
My name's Will Loesch. I'm a dad and a teacher from the northern part of the state in Rhinelander. This is my 2nd time running for office. I ran for state assembly a few years back, and I teach government. And so I see the whole spectrum, the political spectrum. I think there's ideas all over the spectrum, but I'm fully with Maggie in believing that the 2-party system just isn't serving us, and the 2 parties have gotten dogmatic, and we're not good at taking the ideas that are called for a given moment, whether that idea originates from the left or the right. And that's why I'm running as an independent.
Michael?
I'm Michael White. I'm the Green Party candidate for governor. I'm a retired Air Force colonel. I'm a doctor. I work at a major medical system in Wisconsin. I'm running for governor because the number 1 issue for me is climate change. Our children's future is in jeopardy. Your future, your lifetime, will see major change in environmental degradation. Secondly, healthcare is broken. I'm tired of my patients being in tears over the cost of their medicines. Third, we have a political system where people have been voting their fears for the last 50 years. Up, down, yes, no. It's not working well. It is not serving your needs. No other voices other than the 2 major voices, and the major companies voices are heard. So there is no opportunity for intelligent discussion. We have an election which has become totally polarized. Each side hates the other. Neither side listens to the other. The Green Party and my colleagues are an alternative of other voices where we will work together, we will come together, we will provide solutions. And I'm going to turn it over to my Lieutenant Governor.
Hi, Tiffany Anderson. I decided to run on the Green Party ticket primarily because we don't accept corporate financing. It's so difficult as a politician to run the states or the country as for the people when you're getting your major financing from corporations. So I decided Green Party in order to run for the people and to represent your issues instead of major corporations' issues. I am graduated from UWM with majors in human resource management and supply chain and operations management, and I'm fully prepared to help manage the state. Thank you.
Arnie.
Excellent. We're going out of order, keeping me on my toes. I'm Arnie Enns. I'm running for governor underneath a party of my own invention called the Wisconsin Party. First thing I want to do is thank Zach, Ian, and Gabby for hosting this American Democracy Project. Great idea. Thanks for doing this. And you as well, Jim, for hosting this. It's awesome. And to UW Oshkosh, home of the Titans, which is where I went to school. So, as a matter of fact, I like to call it Harvard on the Fox, not Oshkosh, because it's that good of a school, for real. But back to the order of business is I'm running, and it's this thing I'm trying to do societal transformation through political organization and societal organization. So I'm running, but it's not about me. If I run and I don't win, it's just me running for governor, but it's got to be about more than that. That's why I want to do this Wisconsin Party thing. You get ballot access with 1% of the vote. Regardless of getting ballot access or not, we're going to continue to organize. And it's about providing a voice to the disenfranchised, the disillusioned, for the dislocated, for the people that don't have a voice in our current government, because we don't. Right now, our government's really about representing corporate interests to a large degree. And a lot of people will go, wah, corporate interests, and this is all some kind of conspiracy theory thing, but it's not. There's actually studies out there. If you go and you do a little bit of research, you'll see that common people's voices aren't heard. The voices that are heard are the people that contribute to the election campaign process, as well as lobbyists. And there's tons of examples, right? Foxconn's one. Another smaller one is the Bucks Arena, right? The Milwaukee Bucks and their lobbyists spent $50,000, excuse me, a little bit less than $200,000 to get a huge $250 million subsidy to build an arena, right? That's essentially buying government. You and I don't have that kind of money. The only way we get our voices is if we can take back our government. So the Wisconsin Party has three simple things. And remember, it's about the Wisconsin Party, not about me. And the first thing is to take back your government. The second thing is to leave things better than you found it, which highly echoes Dr. White's Green Party platform as well around environmentalism and the short runway that we have left. And the third thing is to be kind.
Thank you, Arnie. Phil.
Hi there, my name is Phil Anderson. I'm the Libertarian candidate for governor in Wisconsin. I am a native of Beloit, Wisconsin. I've spent my whole life here except for serving 3 years in the U.S. military as a combat medic in a Patriot Missile Battalion back a long time ago, and where I served was West Germany, which doesn't exist anymore. I'm a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a degree in geography. I also have a master's degree in applied theology. I have 2 kids, one of whom is here today, not to embarrass him, but my son Samuel, who's very involved in my political campaign as well. I'm very happy to have him here. I haven't always been involved and interested in politics for my entire life, but about 10 years ago I recognized, much as my colleagues have, that there's a problem with our government. And the fundamental problem isn't about Democrats versus Republicans or liberals versus conservatives or whatever. It's about a fundamental relationship that's broken between people who have rights as people, as individuals, as human beings, and the tyranny that is foisted on individuals and on local communities by government that's being controlled by a two-party system that, as Tiffany mentioned, is largely controlled by corporate interests. That's why I got involved in government. All of our issues on our platform are involved with local control and returning power and authority back to the citizens without the control of big corporate interests. And I'd like to introduce my running mate, Patrick Baird. We run as a team. Our website is teamgov.org. And
real quickly, I've lived all around the state of Wisconsin. I currently work as a patient advocate. I assist people with their health care problems, getting their claims paid and their appeals paid, so I'm very familiar with that particular part of the debate that we're having here. The reason I got involved is very simple. There's plenty of candidates out there who are talking about all the things that government can do for you, all the things that they're promising that government can deliver. I thought we needed some voices out there that are going to talk about why maybe government shouldn't be involved in your life, and why there's things that government shouldn't be doing, and why there are things that can be done outside of government more effectively and more efficiently, and also to talk about, in some cases like criminal justice reform, why the government gets involved in a way that's not positive.
Thank you very much. The first question for all of you regards your role as third-party candidates. What argument can you make to Wisconsinites to fight against the narrative that third parties can't win? And how would you respond to the suggestion that you might be repeating the role of Bernie Sanders, Ross Perot, and Ralph Nader, and what the role they played in national elections? And we'll start with Mike.
Okay, so I get that question a lot, and it's a fair question, but let me observe that third-party candidates have won. We'll start with Abraham Lincoln. The Republican Party, when he won, was a new third party. Teddy Roosevelt also won as a third party, so it's not the case that third parties cannot win. It is the case that the third parties in today's election are being curtailed by the major parties because it's not in their self-interest. We do not and did not take votes away from Hillary during the last election. In point of fact, Jill Stein, 60% of her voters were new voters. Also, I would observe that if you wanted to credit Jill Stein's voters to Hillary, then you have to credit Johnson's votes to Trump, which he still would have won the election. So the argument that we take votes away, I think, is a fallacious argument to begin with. But consider what you're faced with. You're faced with voting your fears. You only have two choices. Neither one of them are good. Political expertise, political scientists, political studies have shown again and again that it's the other voices in the middle, the others that are not polarized and not committed to only one viewpoint, that accomplish change. Nobody at the major political party is really talking climate change. My primary goal, and one of the goals of the Green Party, is to change the conversation because your future is in jeopardy. So we bring a new voice to the table, we can influence the major parties, and we may wind up growing a third party. Finally, if we have ranked choice voting, every vote counts. In the current system, you only get A or B and nothing else. With ranked choice voting, which Maggie explains even better than I do, every vote counts, and the third parties would be a major player that would be in a constructive way, and with that I will pass.
Bill?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Dr. White said in pointing out the fact that third-party candidates have won, and that the reason that we're not heard in the public sphere right now is because of the massive amount of money that's spent by Democrats and Republicans in order to keep us out. We know that the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association has set artificially high criteria for allowing us in the debates that they sponsor. Thankfully, we have fora like this to participate in where we can get our voices heard, but clearly Scott Walker and Tony Evers are not here, so this isn't even really a forum that really is between all of the candidates involved. I'd like to point out something that we probably all share in common as well. When you set out to run as a third-party candidate or an independent, you know right off the bat that your chances of winning are slim because of the political realities, the money involved, and the way that people generally conceive of politics as being left and right, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. But there's still secondary goals that can be met, but there are required that you vote for third-party candidates if you support them. And that is, there's a protest aspect in it. When the major parties see that people are not just falling in line, if they got a particular issue, an individual has a particular issue, whether it's marijuana legalization, climate change, guns, whatever it is, Democrats and Republicans take those voters for granted. And that's one of the reasons that Hillary Clinton's campaign didn't go so well in Wisconsin, is because she took different blocks of voters for granted in Wisconsin. When you cast a vote for a third-party candidate, in particular a libertarian, you're saying, I am not happy with the two choices I've been given. I reject the idea that Democrats and Republicans can solve problems. I reject the idea that the government can solve all of our problems. And when you make that statement, not only when you answer a poll, but when you cast a vote, then we'll have the situation that we have right now, where since the Marquette poll came out and had Evers and Walker tied at 47, with myself polling at about 5, I'm getting a tremendous amount of messaging saying, drop out and support Tony Evers or Scott Walker, because now they're concerned. Now they're finally concerned about who's not voting for them, who's not falling into line. And that's progress, not only for our campaign, but for everybody.
Arnie?
Yeah, this is the great part about working with these other candidates is we share so much in common. And I wish that that commonality could be expressed through a current two-party system as well. And the thing we're all talking about and agreeing with when people talk about third-party candidates taking away from who might win the next election, because it's the most important election of our lifetime, again, is that we all agree, right? We need to do anti-corruption sorts of things with our electoral process. So what I have that's a little bit unique and that I actually asked Josh Call about the last time we had an opportunity to sit with him in a shared forum was if he would support the American Anti-Corruption Act. It's an act that's put together by constitutional lawyers that represent the whole spectrum of politics in the United States, and it calls for election reforms as well as governmental reforms to eliminate the influence of lobbyists as well as money in the election process. So I think we can all agree we should do those kinds of things, but only by running as a third-party candidate can we even have that conversation. Both parties say they want to get the money out of politics and get the corruption out of government, but yet it's a captured system. It's a captured regulatory system, like a lot of issues we have with the way our regulatory system works, but the election process is a captured system. There's a whole industry built around this. Michael Porter, he's a Harvard strategist kind of on competition thinking person, has an effort he's put out that's also about calling this out, and they have reforms that they suggest. So it's not just third-party people, it's people in business that are highly respected, and it's both sides want to reform this broken process of how our elections work. Because right now you do have just two choices, but it's a duopoly. And what we should move towards is multi-party representation. Things like fair districting are a great idea, but we really need to have more of a proportional representation system if we really want to solve these problems, so all voices can be heard and be a part of a conversation on what our government is, what our social contract is, and what we really owe to each other. I got a lot more than that. I got a whole page on my website, so hit that up if you want to, okay?
And Maggie?
Yeah, so I've had quite a few people come up to me in the last 6 months and say, you know, I haven't voted in 20 years, but I like what you're saying so much that I'm going to be at the polls this year. And that reaction to the idea of an independent leadership has been present since the very beginning of this campaign. Even when I was getting my signatures, I had people, you know, you're carrying a clipboard, right? And nobody wants to talk to you when you're carrying a clipboard. But as soon as I say, I'm running for governor as an independent, it's like, stop in their tracks, come back, what? Really? And it's like this excitement, this energy for something new and different besides these two main parties. And that is valuable to us as a people. We just need to reclaim our original courage that enabled this country to overcome so many obstacles in the past, where people really just stood up for what was right. And a lot of those people were willing to do that, even if they were the only one. And when we're in a situation where people are hedging everything and can't even go anonymously into a polling booth and vote for the one thing they really believe in, that's a bad situation for our country. You know, we need to be courageous as individual voters. We cannot continue to hedge and second guess and try to predict what everybody else is going to do and then proclaim, well, you can't win, because that refrain, you can't win, it's like a mantra that works against us. We say it over and over again, even though we don't have evidence for that, right? The election hasn't happened yet. But by saying you can't win over and over again, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if all the people just voted for what they really believed in, we would win.
The next question addresses the state budget, and Arnie, we'll start this with you. Medicaid requires the state to pay more in health care costs year by year, and it has created a 2 decades-long fiscal crunch in the state. Previous and current administrations have raised income taxes, raided the transportation fund, and slashed salaries and benefits of public employees. How would you ensure that the state has enough revenue to remain solvent?
Excellent. Zach, thanks for this question. Well written. answering in the context of that question, it's difficult because you have to raise taxes essentially. So that presupposes you keep the system as it is. And what I would do, and I've mentioned this on the website and in other interviews in the past, is that we have to step back and look at our healthcare system holistically. So to presuppose it all has to be paid for from the state government the way that's funded in order to fill the gap with Medicare isn't necessarily true. The fundamental issue we have with healthcare is that it keeps going up in cost and our quality of service doesn't get better. The OECD, this consortium of countries that are market-based democracies in the world, put out numbers on healthcare. And right now the US is spending 18% of our total GDP on healthcare. And the average for the OECD nations is less than half of that. And yet we have the worst outcomes on average of any country. We're in the bottom quartile of almost every measure for healthcare outcomes. So that makes you stop and think the very system we have using Medicare and Medicaid and saying we just have to fund gaps in that in order to provide insurance is the wrong approach. What we really have to do is do what other countries have done and look at a single payer approach with universal coverage such that we can negotiate as a large collective group of people against the system itself, which is set up for its own self-interest and its own profit motives. 20%, almost $1 in $5 goes towards healthcare. And that really has a drag on our economy. It prevents us as individuals to have a free-flowing labor market as well, especially amongst younger people. You have poor job quality opportunities, and oftentimes you're scrambling how to figure out healthcare. Once you get a job with healthcare, you feel locked into it. So it has a drag on us in so many different ways that we really have to step back, not just look at it from the perspective of what gaps we have to fill. Ideally, we'd pay a little bit more towards healthcare as a collective society, and we'd pay less as individuals. And that way you'd get an outcome like the rest of the OECD nations have right now. Thanks.
Phil?
Well, I agree with Arnie in assessing the problem. Healthcare has gone up, health insurance has gone up in every way, shape, or form, including private health insurance and government-run insurance. The problem, though, the basic problem is that the insurance industry is writing all of the legislation that goes to the federal and state governments. Obamacare was written by lobbyists. That's why you heard all the people that were about to vote on it saying that they hadn't read the bill and they don't know what was going to happen. Lobbyists wrote Trump's response to it that he presented after being elected. Lobbyists are involved in every aspect of our government. And the result of that is we have health insurance that's involved in every aspect of health care. The option to that is freeing primary care and basic services from insurance. I belong to a subscription service in Madison. There are other subscription services available where you get your primary care by paying a monthly fee that covers your basic exams, visits, the doctor writes prescriptions, and basic labs. It costs less than $100 a month. There's nobody subsidizing that for me. I pay for that. And I carry health insurance for catastrophic, for unexpected things like insurance is basically meant for. If we look at the analogy of car insurance, think about if you had to have car insurance to cover every single thing you did with your car, how expensive would that be? How bureaucratic would that be? And how much control would the insurance company have over what you drive, how you drive, where you drive? That's the same thing with healthcare right now. So we need to make an effort to get the health insurance industry out of our legislation, holding our legislators to account that they're writing their own bills and they know that what's in them, and creating opportunities for these subscription services to come forth. And then if we need, and we will need, a safety net so that people can still access health care that don't have the means to do so. We're subsidizing something that's inexpensive and accessible, and not just funneling money back to the health insurance industry, which is the cause of the problem in the first place.
Maggie?
Yeah, I really appreciate both Arnie and Phil's ideas. I would say on the healthcare front that I am in favor of taking the federal dollars that are available for expanding healthcare to the people who need it most and can't afford it. I'd also say in terms of the state remaining solvent as a whole, in my opinion, the only thing worse than raising taxes for everybody is lowering them and then taking out loans that we're all going to be accountable for. And, this year, that's just kicking the can down the road. That's not actually solving anything for the state. And this year we saw a $100 tax credit for families with children. And my thought was, boy, you're going to take that $100 and invest it right now because you're going to need that to pay back, the bills that are going to come due in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So that is not effective problem solving, in my opinion. But we also want to make sure that we close tax loopholes for the wealthiest entities in the state, whether we're talking about the richest individual people or we're talking about corporations. We want to make sure that, and this is something the League of Municipalities is on board with, and we've got to close this dark store tax loophole so that the businesses, big box stores that are really extracting a lot of wealth from our communities, that they are also paying their fair share. So lots of pieces to the puzzle.
And Michael?
So I start off with a little different perspective than everybody else because I'm a practicing physician. I treat patients every day. In the first place that I would start, remember the governor can't write laws. The governor can make an issue public. The governor has the ability to hold the legislature accountable, but she or he has to start with what can the government, the administration control. So the first thing that I would look at is drug costs. My pharmacy where I work paid in September 2014, paid $9 and change for a tube of a steroid ointment that I write every day. 3 months later, the cost for that same tube was $175, a 20-fold increase. I'm assuming some people here watch TV and you've seen ads for the drugs for psoriasis, Enbrel, Stelara, Otezla, whatever. The average cost of those per year is 50% greater than the median income. So to the extent that the government has the ability to go after costs, I would work with other state governments and nonprofit organizations to do anything I could to control the cost of health care. Then I would do all the other things that they've been talking about. That's the advantage of coming last, is I get to steal their ideas, all of which are good ideas. And what you will notice today is that you will see more agreement than you see disagreement. You will see us actually answering questions about substantive issues. And I agree with what Maggie says. It's not a simple problem, but we pick up one thread at a time and we don't stop until we solve it. I would start with drug costs.
Thank you. Well, given where we are today, we would be remiss if we did not ask about K through 12 education and higher education. We'll start with you, Phil. Wisconsin does not rank favorably among the states in the Midwest as it regards educational attainment. UWO, the tuition and fees amount to about $7,500 per year. When books and housing are added, the cost jumps to nearly $20,000 a year. Student debt is routinely in the news. If elected governor, what would you do to both improve K through 12 and higher education and make it more affordable?
Wow, that's a lot in 2 minutes. But I'll start with K through 12 and hopefully finish that in a minute and then do higher ed in the second minute. We have a proposal called Universal Open Enrollment. What that proposal will do is put education back in the hands of parents who are currently paying for education. Oftentimes we see the disconnect when we talk about federal dollars or spending, and the fact that that money comes from individual communities and individual taxpayers to begin with. For example, our K through 12 system is funded by property taxes. And everybody pays property taxes. Whether you own a house or not, if you're a renter, you're paying property tax through your landlord. What we seek to do is put parents back in control by freeing up the dollars that are normally assigned to open enrollment, the situation where you can take your children and move them to a different school district and there's a dollar amount that changes hands between districts. Put that back in the hands of parents so they can not only choose a different public school district, choose a private school that doesn't have Common Core standards attached necessarily, which is what the Walker administration does with their voucher program, or any private school they want, or homeschool, and put parents back in charge. Because the idea that taxes are farmed from us, taken from us, and then somehow the government knows exactly what's best for our students and limits our choice, I think is ridiculous and unjust. As far as tuition prices or tuition costs go, we see a direct correlation between the amount of student aid offered, especially in terms of loans, and the increase in tuition. Clearly, it's not a question of throwing money at students and allowing them to pay more for college, because every year since the federal loan subsidies increased, the tuition goes up. We need to look at alternate ways of education that people can access college education that don't necessarily require them to be in residence at a particular schedule at a university. Look at ways to lower those costs and stop funneling money from individuals who borrow money and then owe it for years and years after they graduated, that ends up in the hands of higher education. And we see the ratio of administrators to faculty increasing. We see the amount of new buildings being built increasing. That's where that money's going to. They're making students borrow to pay for more administration and more buildings, and that just doesn't make any sense.
Maggie?
Yep. One of the reasons that I chose Will Loesch as my running mate is because he is an educator, and I consider myself an educator in addition to being a scientist. I've worked in classrooms at every grade level from K through 12 and taught in our Wisconsin Technical College system, which I think is an incredible system for people who don't fit with the university but need access to great jobs. And then the university system itself, which has been under attack by this administration, I think it's fair to say. And one of the changes I'd like to make is make sure our Board of Regents is actually representing the interests of education in our state and understands the purpose of the UW system. And we want to focus, too, on the individual colleges and what their strengths are and really play to those strengths, and then maybe do some distance learning to be more efficient as a UW system. But I want to turn it over to Will to talk about K-12 in particular.
Yeah, first of all, I would say that it's important to recognize that every single one of us benefits from public schools, whether we have kids in the system or not, and even if we spend our whole lives going through private schools. The nurses that are going to take care of us in our final years likely were educated at a public school. So we all benefit from it, so we all need to support it. What we do, we need to overhaul the state funding formula so that rural and inner city schools aren't getting shortchanged. They're getting shortchanged big time right now. We need to adjust local revenue caps so that they're equal. Up in my neck of the woods, you can go to one school and they're allowed to raise $11,000 for a student, and 30 miles away, they're capped at $9,200. So those need to be equalized. That can be done in a tax-neutral way. We do need to stop the flow of tax dollars to private schools. Public dollars should go to public schools. We need to support and regrow our public charter school system and innovation there. And we need to support science instruction, get kids outside. And then lastly, I think we need to revamp standardized testing and by de-emphasizing it and reworking it.
Michael?
So I'm going to exhibit one of those rare moments of vigorous disagreement. I disagree very much with Phil. I like some of his ideas, but I live in the country and the people near me don't have a way to get to an alternative school. The people in downtown Milwaukee don't have good alternate school choices available to them, nor they have the resources to deal with private schools. And I think it's got some merit, but I don't think it's practical. I agree with Will 100%. This is a nation of immigrants. We became Americans in large part because of the quality of our public school system. Our public school system brought people together. It is the foundation of giving everybody in an egalitarian society an equal start in life. So I think it is most important, I would not ignore higher education, but I think it's most important to focus on our primary schools first. And I got to tell you, every time I look, it gets more complicated. The devil's in the details, and I actually don't have all the answers. I would hire Will and people like him to help me find the right thing to do, which is not driven by lobbyists. It's not driven by special interests. It would be driven as much as possible by parents. And I would go from there. I don't think the answers are simple. In some cases, we are going to have to throw money at it because I think our educational system has been underfunded. But we need to get the people that know what they're doing involved, get politics identity, racial identity, and all the other things, religion, all the other things that have been muddying the waters out of it, and focus on what does it take to provide a quality education for every student in every school in the state. And with that, I pass.
Again, going last is great because I can say I agree with just about everything. And with what Will had said and what Michael had said, I agree with. Also with Phil, going back at the secondary education process, yes, we do have to look at putting caps on or asking why we spend so much money on buildings and administration for education. But starting with K through 12, I agree we have to rework the formula for distribution of property taxes throughout the state for its allocation. We have to remove local caps. But we also have to step back and ask ourselves a different question. So as governor, what I'd like to do is establish a blue ribbon commission, and it's one of those kind of amorphous terms, but yeah, we need to get the smartest and brightest people that we have to talk about what we should have for an educational system, because ours is failing us. And it's not just K through 12, it's also our post-secondary educational processes. We started with the Wisconsin idea of UW-Madison. We need to remember that and go back to that on how we can best serve all the people of Wisconsin and everything in Wisconsin with their educational process. We've gotten away from that. And we have to ask ourselves, we imported this system 200 years ago that was great for the Industrial Revolution, but we have to build a new system, one that works in today's economy, and also the realities of climate change we have within our system. We need to teach fundamentally different things that I call our 4 C's, and that I charter this Blue Ribbon Commission with, that it's about teaching creative thinking, critical problem-solving skills, collaboration, and communication. And you can get that from our educational system, but it's not the focus of it. And to me, those are the kinds of things we have to do and reinforce through our whole life cycle. Even post-secondary education and beyond, we should all be continuously learning, continuously trying to better ourselves and the world around us. That's part of what our social contract is with each other, and education is one of those key pillars of our society that we have to pay a lot more attention to and not quibble over small items with it like we do now, and be narrowly focused only on things like charter schools or what gets taught. My time's up, thanks.
Okay, Maggie, you're first on this one. We've all seen billboards about scaffolds. All humor aside, how do you propose to pay for our crumbling transportation system and other infrastructure needs?
Yeah, no two ways about it. We have some hard decisions to make. So I think it's interesting to note that Wisconsin has more paved roads than any state in the union. And I think that surprises people because we're not the largest state in the union, but we have a very distributed population with a lot of paved roads connecting them all together. And we also live in a part of planet Earth that experiences a freeze-thaw cycle every year. And that's very hard on our roadways. We've also made decisions in the past 10 years not to develop alternative transportation that would have taken pressure off of our highways. That train system between Milwaukee and Minneapolis through Madison really could have helped us out a lot when it comes to our infrastructure, in addition to providing a lot of jobs. And I think that if we get an opportunity like that again, we better not pass it up. That would have benefited a lot of people. And the rejection there was just purely a rejection of President Obama. So let's continue, let's get back to looking at how alternative transportation can relieve pressure on our highways. We are going to have to just straight up, we're not made of money, right? So we're going to have to just straight up prioritize what are the most serious projects that are affecting the most people and cause the greatest safety hazards. And we're going to have to do those first and work our way down the list. I hope that when we are building roads, we can move toward a model where we're taking 15-year bids. We want a highway. We don't just want a new highway. We want a highway that's going to last at least 15 years. What's it going to cost? And that's the bid. Because every time we have to fix something, it interrupts our economy. We get blocked traffic, we get accidents, we get a lot of problems. And so just by investing a little bit more up front on high-quality roads, we could save ourselves in the longer run. But we have to be intentional about that. And then something that this might be a small part of the puzzle as well, is do we actually need as many paved roads as we have? So I will stop talking now. Thank you so much.
Michael?
So I agree with everything that Maggie said, so I can pass that, but I want to talk about the railroad for a minute, because we're going to come to Foxconn eventually. Foxconn is going to give us maybe 13,000 jobs, temporarily, until they automate all those jobs out of existence. And we had to give them a $4.5 billion tax cut to do it. The railroad, light rail project that Governor Walker turned down would have created 36,000 jobs, and they would have been durable jobs. It would have benefited the economy in a durable way. So what would I do about our roads? Well, I like what La Crosse County is doing. I got a flyer in the mail telling me on Tuesday there's going to be an advisory referendum. Do I want to pay for the roads personally by borrowing money, kicking the can down the road, and paying interest for a long time? Do I want to raise my license plate fees for me and all the truckers? Or do I want to take money from those evil tourists that come into town and will tax all the tourist industries because they're destroying our roads? I would argue that each of those has a little bit of merit, but I think we're going to do some of each of them because I don't think it's going to be a simple problem to solve. And I think we're going to have to prioritize. We're going to have to pick the most serious places first. We're going to have to go, I've never heard this 15-year project before, so I'm going to steal that idea because I think that's great. I'm retired military, and we did have projects in the military that I was involved in selecting where it had, this has to last X number of years. When you invest in equipment for an overseas military installation that may come under fire, you have very specific criteria that need to be met, and durability is one of them. So I'm going to steal all of Maggie's ideas and throw in a few of my own, and I'm done.
Arnie?
Yeah, so, again, I agree with a lot of things these guys just said, so I'm not gonna cover it again. But I would think that we should pay out of our current revenue streams for the things that we use today. So with taxes, you'd either have a gas tax or else you could add something that's more of a progressive tax rather than a regressive tax and make it be associated with the value of a vehicle or a number of wheels on a vehicle for truck drivers and the like as a way to have more proportional spend for usage of roads. But the larger question is about infrastructure. And this is where I'm going to bring up a subject completely unrelated but ties back with it, if you will bear with me for a minute. It's around our economy in general. We constantly preach growth in our economy. If you look over a 90-year history, it's between 2% and 5% every year except for a handful of years where you have a recession. We have to change how we operate as a society, or else we're going to run out of resources, and that ecological disaster that's looming is going to come at us even quicker. So part of an infrastructure plan or a road plan or consumption of petrofuels have to be a part of that degrowth. So I would advocate, and I would use the governor's office as a platform to talk about, is let's pursue zero GDP growth for 2 years while we talk about how to shrink in a smart way. Because we have to shrink our economy, we have to shrink our infrastructure, we have to shrink our consumption and materialism if we're going to have any shot at being sustainable within the carrying capacity of Earth as a system. I know it's a lot of stuff, it's kind of long-winded, but if you go and you have the time, I have a page on my website for it, but look up degrowth or negative GDP growth. There's alternative economic models that we need to discuss if we're really going to truly say, I believe climate change is happening, or I believe we have sustainability issues, or I believe we're poisoning ourselves and our society. If you believe that, you cannot continue to vote the way you vote or to believe in constant growth. If you want to change that, you have to start advocating for different ways of thinking in large about our society and what we do every day and what we do as individuals. Because what we're doing today is not going to work. Thanks.
Well done.
Okay, let's turn to our natural resources, and Michael, you're going to be first.
Oh.
I didn't get a chance to
I'm
answer
sorry,
that question.
I missed you, Phil. Check it out, sorry.
Oh, that's no problem.
You can get the
This is
truck.
actually a subject that I have a good deal of experience with. Not only did I study urban transportation as part of my geography degree, but I've been in the taxi business in Madison for about 25 years. Something we should talk about when we talk about large-scale alternative transportation projects is that pretty much every train system that's been imposed on a city or a state in the last, well, since Chicago grew up around its train system, and New York did as well, is that they lose money and they're low on ridership. You can't impose a mass transit situation that's involved in trains on an existing developed area because there's not population density enough for that, there's not ridership enough for that, and while there's probably politics involved, I'm sure there was politics involved in the rejection of the train idea, there was also serious cost issues about what was being picked up by the federal government, what would it cost the state, and how many people would ride it. And that was part of the situation as well. And I personally oppose the train as somebody who's been involved in that industry. But the problem with the DOT and about building roads is actually about, we don't even really know how much it costs to build roads. It's interesting that Maggie brought up that we have the most paved roads in the country. I did not know that. But I don't think it's just because we have a dispersed population, because other states have that, or because of our climate or whatever. We know for a fact that there's a ton of corruption in the Wisconsin DOT going back through the Tommy Thompson administration. Those people that lobby the state government and legislators have an office right across the street from the Capitol, and they're up there all the time. And as a matter of fact, just a couple of weeks ago, it was pointed out by the Journal Sentinel that the Wisconsin DOT regularly double pays contractors for parts of road projects in Milwaukee, and those contractors didn't have the sense or they're not used to having to report that back to the state in a way that it would get returned. Clearly, there's a ton of corruption. So the first thing I'll do as governor is order a forensic accounting firm to do an audit of the Wisconsin DOT, so at least we can get to a point where we get rid of all the waste, fraud, and abuse and the corruption and find out exactly what it costs to build a road in Wisconsin, and then go from there.
All right. Now, the state's natural resources in you, Michael. According to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the current administration and majority party have engineered a major shift in how the Wisconsin DNR operates, loosening regulations protecting our natural resources. Employment within the DNR has fallen by 22%, a reduction that started in the Doyle administration. The Division of Science Services has been eliminated. The phrase climate change has been banned from the DNR website. How do you view these changes, and what would you do as governor to address our natural resources challenges?
It is not true that I paid Zach to write that question in a way that would fit everything I wanted to talk about. But I'm the Green Party candidate, and the main reason I got involved in this was concern about the environment. I could go on I promise this won't take longer than 20 minutes. But the reality is that I've got a limited amount of time, so I would start by putting science back into the state government, into the DNR. I would make fact-based decisions instead of policy decisions. My platform is put planet, principle, and people ahead of profit. We need no more Pruitts. A Pruitt is a short-term choice made for the benefit of a few, usually a company, with disastrous downstream consequences. When we waive pollution fines for big companies, when we give giveaways of natural resources to big companies, we're not putting the people first. So I would do an assessment of where we are at. I could go on for an hour about climate change, and I would like to, but as the governor, I would start by working with all the governors of the states bordering the Great Lakes to have a real state of assessment of the status of the Great Lakes and our water supply and how we are causing pollution. And then I would work with them and all the other states that have signed on to the Paris Climate Accords. I would work with creating reciprocal agreements with the other states where we share natural resources. And to the extent possible, I would be transparent and I would lead the way, because the governor can lead by example, and our current example is terrible. And with that, I will pause and pass.
Phil?
I agree with a lot of what Dr. White said, and I think there's more that the state can do as well. We all were at an event up in Kashina, Wisconsin, the Menominee Indian tribe, back in, I think it was June or July, talking about, it was called Water is Life. And the issue up there was a mine that had been permitted to be began on the Michigan side of the Menominee River. And the concern up there was not only with the Indian tribe, but the adjoining counties, that there would be water pollution because of this mine that would affect the property and enjoyment of the property of people that lived along the river and inland from there. The state basically is willing to do nothing about it, and that's part of the problem. A proper role of government is to enforce the rights of the little guy, the rights of the property owner, the rights of the individual. And as governor, what I would do in that situation, and any situation where somehow or another a big company got a permit to open up, whether it's a mine or a cattle operation or whatever, that was creating pollution and wrecking people's property around it, is to stand up for the individual rights and the property rights of those people around it. That's a directly anti-corruption sort of thing. Right now, we've got a governor in place who has changed the rules about mining permits, and it allows mines to open in whatever part of the state, not allowing local units of government to make their own permit decisions, and getting rid of the rule that they had to demonstrate that they operated for 10 years cleanly before they locate there. That's clearly Governor Walker saying, I don't care what's going on locally, I just want this mine to open, and there's probably campaign contributions coming back from that. If we stand up for individuals' rights to enjoy their own property, then the situation of pollution, the situation of natural resources, all those things that we understand are symptoms of corrupt government can go away. And when people want to spend money on politicians and to get things done, we will resist that, and it won't happen, because we have a solid, fundamental, philosophical respect for people to enjoy their own property, no matter how close they are to a mine that might be politically useful.
Maggie?
Yeah, I would say that, so in this country, I would say we have a lot of respect for science. It's a lot of what has made our country great. And the Republican Party, I have to point out, has been good for science in a lot of ways. As astronomers, the Republican Party can be relied upon to make big investments that really move our nation forward on science and technology fronts. However, in the state of Wisconsin, it's like a left turn away from that. And scientists who work in our government offices are completely censored. They're not even allowed to use normal scientific language to talk about what they're doing. And the fact is that we are all scientists. Anybody who makes an observation and is capable of seeing the consequences of an action is a scientist. That's all science is. And when people specialize in that, and we welcome them into our government offices so that we can understand how to make policies that are informed by careful observations, that is what helps our state remain solvent and preserve the natural heritage that we are so proud of here and that attracts people to our state. So I agree with basically everything Michael and Phil just said, and I want to say that as governor, I will definitely be returning a culture of respect for science to the state of Wisconsin.
All right.
And I'd also echo all of those things. And the Democrats say that as well, right? It's like put science back in the DNR. Of course we should do that. These things are about the discovery of truth, not necessarily about the discovery of what somebody's political preferences are in order to make a case for resource extraction or for businesses to set up. Of course, that's a part of our economy in the world we live in today, but that has to be balanced with looking at a larger picture. As I indicated with my last response, our society's at risk because of these things that we could call existential crises. So regarding natural resources in the DNR, you can disavow climate change if you want to, but to me that's like putting your head in a hole and ignoring the facts of things. But even if you were to do that, there's other markers of a lack of sustainability that we have to start paying attention to. And it includes things like lack of species biodiversity. That's a crisis that's happening right now. If you look at alternate news sites, you'll see a lot of information around like 75% insect die-off studies in Puerto Rico or in a place in Germany that they've studied for hundreds of years. We don't really talk about that in the current debate between Walker and Evers, but those are the things that should make us stop and ask ourselves fundamental questions around sustainability and the natural resources in the world around us. Or even if, let's say, you disallow those two things, we still see the results of too much phosphorus and nitrogen in our environment from our runoff. We see it in our lakes and our waterways, which is a part of the DNR stuff as well, or you'll see it in the south of Florida with red tides killing everything. That's a marker as well that we're living beyond our means. So, long story, written a little bit short, we have to stop looking at our growth paradigm and our economy without looking at the system around us in which we live. So I think we have to use the platform of the governor and our social contract to talk about these things and make really hard choices. Because the U.S. uses 30% of the global resources, yet we have about 4% of the population. It's not sustainable. We have to find a way to shrink that.
Maggie, you're up to the plate on the last question before the break, and this is a question about electoral reform. In this election cycle, the Republican and Democratic gubernatorial candidates have raised and spent something around $14 million. Some claim this has a corrosive effect on politics. How much have you spent in your campaign, and what changes could you affect as governor that would improve the Wisconsin electoral process?
Right, so my campaign is about a $15,000 campaign, which I actually feel is too much. That is, normal people cannot afford that. And about half of that was raised through small contributions. The other half I put up myself because I really wanted this to happen. I believed in what we could do here. $15 million is outrageous. I think that to look at that incomprehensible amount of money and the impact that it's having on our democracy in the state is it's mind-boggling, and we have to we have to find our way out of this big money stranglehold that we're stuck in right now with our democracy. There are a couple ways that we can do this. One is to move, first of all, we're going to just have to be really courageous and start electing people who stand up to that and are not part of it. And what I would do, my first act actually on day one of becoming governor, would be to instate a governor's commission on election reforms, day one, so that we can begin drafting legislation that'll move us toward ranked choice voting, where you rank all your candidates. You don't just pick one, you rank them, and if your favorite, independent candidate doesn't get enough votes to stay in the race, then your vote will still go to your second choice. I do that. I support that as a concession to the fact that we are no longer able to walk into the voting booth and just vote for the best candidate. We need that safety net, so I will support it. But otherwise, I want to look at the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and the Marquette Law School, and I want to look at the influence they are having on our elections, because through polling, which is very inaccurate, these people determine who they're going to poll and how they're going to do it, and it actively steers when these polls are reported, they are steering people towards certain outcomes, and I think that's wrong.
Arnie?
Yeah, election reforms, we need it left and right. I already mentioned the American Anti-Corruption Act, and Maggie had said that she'd have them draft legislation. That'd be a great place to start. And whoever gets elected as governor next should do the same thing. We should all demand that. We should make that a central issue to the campaign, if it's at all possible. Because our election process, our electoral process, is a captured market that's owned by the two special interest groups that are the Republican and the Democratic Party. They don't want competition. They want to engage with us. And they don't want to change the laws and the regulations that would allow that system to change. Because those two parties are actually owned by special interest groups and moneyed elite and corporations as well. So they essentially run the system. The system is rigged, and we're getting screwed. And if we don't do something about that and we change our election process, then we're going to continue going down this path, and it's not going to end well. We have more and more inequality across our society. We have more nationalism. We have more racism. We're emotionally triggered by our system in order to keep us distracted from the fact that, well, we're arguing back and forth around identity politics issues that have become weaponized. Somebody else, AKA all the folks with money, are reaching and stealing the wallet out of our back pocket and running off with it. So if we don't wake up to that, and I think everybody feels that, everybody knows that, but what do you do about it? Well, the answer is to say, I'm not going to vote for either one of these two parties because they are a lesser of two evils. And I'm going to think for myself, and we're going to demand that we do stuff like the American Anti-Corruption Act. And real quick, too, because I only got 30 seconds, the whole thing on the roads is a great point. I'm a former biker, and we do have the most paved roads in Wisconsin, and it's great for biking. The reason for it, it's the milk industry, all the dairy farms. Back in the day, glass bottles would break if you had gravel roads. So Wisconsin, when we had real dairy farms, rather than these mega dairy farms, these CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, which spread fertilizer and poison throughout our system. Before those things came into place, when we had real dairy farms, we needed that road system.
And how much was your campaign?
Oh, I've spent about $450.
Okay, Phil?
We've raised and spent about $16,000 so far, and almost all of that, except for maybe $500, has been raised by contributions from people of $250 or less over the course of the year, so that we've been actively campaigning. I'd like to agree with everything that's been said so far. One of the big problems, obviously, is that if people are willing to sell themselves, then they'll be bought. So right now we have Republicans and Democrats who are so desperate to stay in power, that is their job. The basic economy of politics is there are large corporate interests that want to have advantage in the economy. The best way to do that is to pay politicians and political parties, and often they pay both sides, Republicans and Democrats. Forgive me for saying both sides. I know there's more than two sides. We're trying to get good on our language about two-party system and trying to erase that. Forgive me, Maggie. But
I agree.
They pay both sides, and what they pay them for is to enact legislation and maintain a monopoly so that those moneyed interests maintain their competitive advantage. We see that in terms of the rhetoric of this campaign and why we're being excluded. But in almost every situation, government, whether it's Democrat or Republicans, exert some sort of influence over the economy or over people's behavior or over the rhetoric or over whatever it is. and they trade that for the campaign contributions, then allow them to exclude the rest of us from the conversation and for them to maintain power. If you've been watching television at all the last couple of days, every commercial break, 3 minutes long, is 6 political commercials, sometimes more than one from the same candidate. They are trying to drive people either away, I'd argue, by pissing people off, forgive my French, and making them uninterested in politics because it's so negative, and then the people that are partisans that can be excited by fear, envy, and anger to go to the polls and to make them believe that this is the most important election in their lifetimes. The only reason that this election is important because there's 4 very qualified people up here running for governor, and none of us are in favor of dirty politics. We're all in favor of cleaning it up, and that's why we're all excluded.
Mike?
My campaign has raised less than $1,000. 80% of it is my own money. Part of it is that I wasn't real good about finding help right off the bat, and I only recently acquired the help that I really needed to start going out and getting money and more support. I want to tell you something really good that has happened. First of all, your election workers, the people that work in the polls, are doing that out of love for their country and out of love for the process. And I have nothing negative to say about the people that work all the way up to the Wisconsin Election Commission, because I dealt with them personally during the last recount. I'm not going to ask what you thought about the last recount because we don't have time, but I will tell you the results, and I'm sure that most of you don't know the results. Never mind who won. As a result of the recount, which the Green Party asked for, and which Jill Stein got $7 million donated in 2 weeks from across the country, we learned that our voting machines can be hacked, that our voting machines have problems, and as a result of her standing up for your vote, a whole class of voting machines has been decertified in Wisconsin permanently. Next week, Tuesday, 5% of the votes will be hand counted in a risk-limiting audit. So as governor, one of the things that I would do is I would emphasize transparency. That's number one. Number two, I do want everybody to take 2 seconds. Look around in this room. How many black people do you see? How many people of color? This country right now is changing. I've lived in 10 states, 2 foreign countries. I've served in 2 branches of the military. I grew up in the Detroit area, which was 70% black when I lived there. We are now a rainbow country, and both parties, to some degree, have been trying to keep all those other voices out. So one of the things that I would do is everything I can to make it easy to vote, to get people engaged. We would have a very different country if everybody voted, and I'm done.
We've come to the end of the 58 minutes that is allotted for the broadcast time. We're going to take a couple-minute break, and then we will come back and finish the questions.